The answer to your question is that there are people who have awakened without any previous practice, Eckhart Tolle being one. However, in Tolle's case he was suffering so intensely that he spontaneously self-inquired as to the suffering self, and he was suddenly ejected from the dream as the unreality of the unhappy, me, was seen through. There was then a falling away of the separate sense of self. It apparently still took 10 years or more for the awakened state to become stabilized, so there was still some work to be done. Byron Katie was another who awakened after intense suffering, which led her to inquire into the thoughts and beliefs that create suffering, and she found that none of it is true. She did not have a shortcut but several years of unfolding of her awakening. She developed the work as a way for people to inquire into what they are believing that creates suffering and to either change it, turn it around, or drop the thought. She awakened through a deep insight as to the workings of the mind and ego and how suffering is generated. A small minority of awakened teachers have said that meditation or mindfulness-based practice is not required for awakening, but with some investigation it turns out that they did in fact have a meditation practice for many years, which probably prepared the ground for awakening, even though they do not attribute the awakening to the previous practice. Those in whom consciousness has awakened fall generally into one of the three following categories. Those who awakened through intense suffering which led them to self-inquire and who experienced sudden insight. Those who awakened after a long period of meditation and/or mindfulness practice as well as following a particular path. Those who say that practice did not lead to awakening and that spiritual awakening happened when they stopped practicing. In these cases it is likely that practice prepared the ground and was necessary, otherwise they would not have done it. Most studied and imbibed non-dual pointings which lead to a clear seeing of reality. No two awakenings are identical, although the realizations are the same in essence. Yes, I think it is possible, but meditation is a helpful tool to find the different mind spaces that when experienced brings about spiritual awakening. When one sees and realizes why the mantra is used in meditation and what it does to thinking and how it silences the mind, then meditation does not become the central practice that is necessary for spiritual awakening, but it is a good tool for deep resting the mind and body via silence in mind whenever you need it and whatever else that might come from the practice. But to experience spiritual awakening there is another simpler trick in mind that works a lot easier than cross-legged meditation, and you will see the mantra and the practice of meditation as only a facilitator to stop verbal thinking in us so we can bring on the silent mind to investigate further the other mind spaces that exist in us. The trick here is to drop your mind into a silent mode as quickly as possible. Instantly if possible. There is an anomaly in verbal thinking that you can use to make this happen. I will describe it in the following text. When the mind is silent, that's your most difficult part already done. The rest runs on auto mode and self-observation of the different mind spaces that show up. On your part is to stay as long as possible in those different mind spaces as you can, and the reason for this is to empty out the rest of the stuff that is still running through your mind, and only time in its space can do this as the mind falls into further silence and then disappears. You have then gone through the whole spectrum of your mind, from chaos and noise in the verbal thinking mind to no mind in the silent mind. So where in all these mind spaces you have been through is your true self. Once these different mind spaces have been experienced and embedded in you, then you can choose from where in them you would like to work from during your daily activities. You will come to realize that verbal thinking is the creator of duality and the dream of existence in you. The silent mind brings you closer to your true self and how you might be just a sliver of the whole of the universe and connected to it via consciousness. Science today is beginning to show us how we might be connected to consciousness and how it might be communicating with us. The bliss of enlightenment comes from experiencing and knowing our place in the whole of things and having control of our minds. The body is kept healthy and the mind is rested with sleep, so the overall mind-body-spirit is in a state of an all-knowing blissful state of being. What more can there be to all of life of an individual? The collective whole needs to come about similarly off this individual center and multiply in numbers and work together. To come to silence in mind quickly you can use this technique. There are different types of thinking: verbal thinking and pictorial thinking and intuitive thinking, and I recognize the final type that Nick, who is Nick, link below, is talking about, which I shall call divine thinking. You will find through observation that verbal thinking, which can be said to be the front line of thinking, is such that you need to silently speak what you are thinking for you to think at all. It is an anomaly in you. We are all wired this way. Once you have observed this, then use this sensation in your vocal cords to stop silently speaking what you are thinking, and your mind instantly is into the silent zone. You can do this anytime, during cross-legged meditation and anytime during the waking walking day. This is, in fact, the function of the use of the mantra during meditation. It just distracts you from silently verbalizing what you are thinking. When the mind stops verbal thinking, then the rest of the magic in mind that Nick mentions just comes naturally by just being and internal observation. Pictorial thinking and intuitive thinking is a bit more difficult to get rid of, but you will find that the more time you spend in that silent mind space, the more those silent thoughts will disappear. Then you will arrive at the state of divine thinking. Nick explains this really well in his Kundalini article. You will find yourself initially silently in conversation with an intention in mind with another, or accessing some sort of another realm where everything that you sense and feel and information that you get is true. I assume that this is the Brahman repository. You can work off this, even when you are in the waking state. It is a silent way of working things out in your mind when you are awake and walking about and doing things.